Welcome to the podcast, you people. My name is Paul. If this is your first time, this is the podcast about faith, Bible, society, and everything else in between. This afternoon, my great friend Antonio Ortiz is here to have a chit chat with us about a very fascinating topic that I'm very interested in, which is the topic about, interacting, reading, and studying the Bible without any faith commitment. And that is an aspect of, biblical studies that, is not really often spoken about because, for the most part, people think about biblical studies as, sort of attached to faith. But he thinks very differently about it. And I think that we will all learn great things from him. So let's go to Antonio and learn from his reflections and from his experience. So thank you for hanging out with me on Saturday this morning.
It's truly, truly a joy. It is truly, truly a pleasure. I'm so excited to be out here. I loved the very first episode that I got to hear as a part of our class experience. And like the moment you asked, I was like, absolutely. I would absolutely love to be involved. And I am so glad that I get to be here with you on Saturday and get to talk.
Awesome. I'm sure listeners would want to know just a little bit about you as much as is needed for the purposes of the discussion today, but more on your journey with the Bible. I think that's an important part in a preface to the conversation we're going to have. So,
definitely. So my name is Antonio Gansley Ortiz, and I currently go to Yale Divinity School, where in 72 days from us recording,
oh my God,
I will be graduating. Nobody's counting. I promise. While here, I decided that much of my time was going to be focused on studying the Hebrew Bible, especially in its sort of like historical, cultural contexts, right? While also applying various types of things like post-colonial theory, queer theory, various types of academic analysis tools and theories to try and understand what exactly was going on. And so your question about like my journey with the Bible is a part about my journey to get here to divinity school, right? So growing up, right, I'm Latino. There's a lot of cultural Catholicism that exists that is sort of inseparable from my identity, but I wouldn't necessarily call that a relationship with the Bible. I wasn't raised as a Christian. And today I am a practicing Buddhist, right? So for me, the Bible itself is not my faith text, right? It doesn't figure into necessarily how I view the world.
Right.
But it does affect so many people.
Oh my God.
And it does affect so much history and so much culture, including my culture, which I can't, unseparate, right? There is a way that even though the Bible isn't my faith text, it has shaped and formed me because I live in a world shaped and formed by the Bible.
By the Bible. That's so brilliant.
Right? And so I'm fascinated by that. Yeah. And I'm fascinated by storytelling.
Yes.
Narrative and storytelling are so important to the formation of community, to the perseverance of different peoples throughout time and space, especially during incredible times of strife and warfare, right? And like, to me, that's what the Bible is a testament to more than anything else, right? Is a people, especially the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish people, speaking and writing themselves into the history of the world and into existence. Right? They make themselves through storytelling, and the stories are so powerful and so deeply culturally embedded that the Jewish people have survived, 2,500 years, which has included some of the most sort of horrible events in human history, right? Not the least of which is the Holocaust in the 30s and 40s, right? And so you have these incredibly powerful stories, and then Christianity takes up these stories and becomes a global religion, right? And all of the good and bad stuff that is included in being a global religion, everything from, revolutionary movements to straight up imperialism. And all of that is there, and all of that touches the Bible. And so for me, talking about the Bible and talking about the stories and trying to tease out not just content, but method is so important to me, because I think that we learn so much, especially for me as a non-faith reader. I learned so much from the method of what's going on.
And very, very fascinating story. Truly, I'm sure people will be curious about what that journey has been for you, right? Because I wouldn't say most, but definitely a majority of people come to the study of the Bible first by encountering it from a faith perspective, right? And so I'm sure you were studying the Bible alongside people who have experiences that are different from yours, right? They came into the field, from a faith perspective. In fact, you are studying at a majority Christian divinity school, right? and you are here because you see the importance and the power and the influence of Bible on culture, contemporary culture, and you want to be able to understand the world in which you live, and studying the Bible is one of those. But there are people here, or people in your class, or people you're meeting on the corridors of your school, and they are doing it for different purposes. How, before we get into the details of reading it from a faith perspective and all of that, how has that experience been for you, studying the Bible around people who do it far from what you do?
So, in many ways, I have been particularly fortunate in that I have surrounded myself with really, really good people, right? And so, in some sense, it doesn't matter if those people are approaching it from a sort of non-faith perspective or from a faith perspective, because they're all really great people. And so I've been able to have, like with you, just these incredible, wonderful conversations, right? And that is not always the case. And it's not always the case on both sides of that, right? You have these sort of very, you see them on the internet all the time, these militant anti-theists, right? People who are like, I hate the Bible, and and anybody who looks at the Bible and even reads it, even for like historical context, they're dumb. And it's like, no, I'm good. I'm not trying to hang out with you, right? And then you have folks who are like, well, this is the one true text, and if you disagree with my particular reading of it, you're going to hell. And I don't want to hang out with those people either. And I've been really, really fortunate that even being in as you say, right, a Christian seminary, which is Christian majority, where most of the folks around me are coming to it from a faith perspective. I've been so fortunate that all of those people want to engage me, right, and want to talk across the word we use here, right? The lines of difference, right? Just because we come from different, social backgrounds or ethnicities or approaches, faith traditions and approaches to text, we still have ways in which we can communicate. And so, I have been particularly fortunate to be around really great and wonderful people.
Oh my God.
And so neither my non-traditional, non-faith approach, nor their traditional faith approaches have ever been a problem in us having dialogue. Which I also recognize is not true to everyone's experience, right? I'm solely talking about my experience, of which I'm incredibly fortunate.
You use important words here. You use dialogue, great human beings. Don't we all need that in the world? Like, oh my God. Yeah. Great. So, what then does it look like to care about the Bible, to read it, and to think about it from a non-faith perspective? you have mentioned, you describe yourself as a practicing Buddhist. And it's like, it's a religion that is not anywhere near the Bible, right? And but you care about the Bible for other cultural reasons that are strongly, convincingly powerful and truly relevant. So what does it then look like, and how does it what does it mean, right, even to do it the way you do it?
I would say that I have two fundamental approaches, right? And one of them, as I sort of hinted at earlier, has to deal with method. And I want to actually get to that one second.
Good. Okay.
The first one has to deal with the sort of more grounded, quotation marks with my fingers, political analysis of the Bible.
Okay, yeah,
right?
I'm interested in that.
And in part, that is because, okay, so one of my main focuses is the harem narrative. And for people who are unfamiliar, harem is a word that is particularly difficult to translate in the Hebrew Bible, but it comes up in Deuteronomy and in Joshua, and it is essentially narratively the genocide command, right? You are to go into this land, and all of the people who are there that God is going to have you force them out, and you harem them.
Yeah.
Right? That language and the language of liberation that is found in the book of Exodus, right? Of God leading an enslaved people out of Egypt.
That's right.
Those are two incredibly powerful political statements. So 1949, David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, right? They've just had the Arab-Israeli war, and Israel was successful. And in 1949, he's directly comparing the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to the conquest of Joshua. And he's directly drawing from the language and the ideas. And this becomes so important to early Israel and early Zionism, right? A year later, right, in Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, right, is being described by the Evening News as the messenger of destiny who goes before us in a pillar of fire.
Oh my God.
That's Exodus 13.
That is.
Right? Those are two incredibly powerful political movements that have shaped the whole second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, right? The independence movement that starts in Ghana that fuels African liberation, right? And the role of Israel, right? And both of those things are directly tied to biblical imagery and biblical references and using the Bible and storytelling to remake creation today. Not just historically, not just God making creation, right? But us recreating the narratives and the stories and the truth necessary to operate in the world. And so that's directly tied to my second thing about method, right? Which is that for me, the content of the Bible is less important than its construction in some sense. So when the Bible says something like, don't wear clothing of mixed fibers, right? Or says something like, a man should not lie with a man as he lies with a woman, right? Both of those things, as moral instructions, mean nothing to me personally in content. But how they ended up in the text, how they ended up next to each other, how the stories in Genesis, right? The creation of mankind is so important. And so we have one story where man and woman are created at the same time of the same stuff, completely equal. And immediately after that, next chapter.
Like 3 seconds after.
Like right there, next chapter, it's woman was created from man's rib. Right? Those are two radically different positions on the equality of the sexes. Of where we come from.
That's right.
and they're both there. And to quote our professor, right, Joel Baden, they are equally true and equally biblical according to the biblical standard. And so what do you do with that?
What do you do
right?
with that? Yeah.
And so to me, when I'm talking about I want to investigate method, it's why did these things get put together? Because that matters. And how do we see how Deuteronomy retells Exodus? And how do we see how Joshua retells Deuteronomy? And on and on and on. And not my field of expertise, but how the New Testament retells aspects of the Hebrew Bible, right? That's the same thing as the messenger of destiny, like walking before us in a pillar of fire, right? So all of those things come together for me as a non-faith reader as being incredibly important, because it's about how people make meaning in the world, and it's about how we can construct a better world together better, right?
Yeah. What I'm getting here is you can still do a lot of cool stuff.
Oh yeah,
with the Bible, and think about a lot of cool things without necessarily being a faith person with the Bible, right? And a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are beginners, and they're the people that I'm trying to focus on. People who will never go to seminary, people who will never sit in a classroom, people who will probably even never read any academic standard textbook on the Bible, but they still care about the Bible for some reason. And maybe thinking, oh yeah, you need to be involved in the faith to be able to make meaning out of this. What you're showing us is like an alternative, but a fascinating alternative that you can still do these like cool things and think cool thoughts and make a contribution to humanity and to the world without necessarily being a faith person, right? Let me clarify the faith thing. Like a faith person in terms of like being a Christian or a Jew or like, any of those like religions that has something directly to do with the Bible. That's what I mean by that.
Yes, right. Totally. I think there's so much that can be done and is done with the Bible. Is done, right? Right. And both, I'm talking really positively because like ultimately my goal in life, right, and my core religious commitment as a Buddhist is the liberation of all beings from suffering, right? Like that's point one of my personal religious commitment.
That's right.
I recognize that the Bible is also used for horrible things.
Oh yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
Including by people who do not have faith commitments.
Yes.
Right? We like to think, I think, that there is this thing where only like fundamentalist Christians or fundamentalist Jews or, these types of groups use the Bible for bad stuff, perhaps, right? Speaking from an American context and from a very liberal university where we go, right? I recognize that there are some people who very much do not agree with me on that position.
For sure, yeah.
But like Vladimir Putin, who is probably not a deeply committed Christian based on many of his former comments, still today is using the Bible to justify aspects of the war in Ukraine. It's the Bible is operative in the world.
Yes.
It is not just a dead book.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it really, really powerful and really, really important, I think, for folks to engage in. And I think you can do that from almost any perspective. I think you could do that if you want to say you're like a Marxist, or if you want to say that you are, a very conservative, fundamentalist Christian, or if you want to say, that you are deeply committed to liberal values and democracy, and from any perspective, you can pick up the Bible and you can do stuff with it.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that that's also an invitation for us, even as folks who don't use the Bible from a faith perspective religiously, to also do stuff with it.
Yeah.
Right? If there was anything that I could say to listeners about, like, should I or shouldn't I be doing? Of course you should.
Yeah.
Like pick it up and do things with it, because it impacts and intersects with your life in so many ways, even if that is unwanted, right? And that can be really difficult. And I think in times of difficulty, it's really important to be working through these questions with community, with people that you trust, right? And that doesn't necessarily, sometimes, hopefully, that is your family or your neighborhood or your friends, right? Hopefully you have a community like that where you can work through those questions in a supportive environment. Right. But sometimes you don't. And that doesn't mean that you have to come to Yale and go to seminary with a bunch of liberal Christians to find that, right? Yeah. You can find that. They do exist out there in the world, online and in person, right? Yeah. But finding people is always better, in my opinion, than trying to, like, suffer alone. Yeah. Right? And that's how we get eisegesis. Yes. Right? Where you're not exegeting text. Yes. But you're just like, nope, I think this, and I'm going to find the ways in which I can make the Bible support me. Yeah. Right? That's so to define eisegesis, right? That's that's basically what eisegesis is. What is it? Yeah. Whereas exegesis is when you are communicating with lots of outside sources and talking to them and, like, coming to an idea about what the Bible is saying, right? Both of those things are really different, and I would say that for me, exegesis is a much more important thing than eisegesis.
Right. Well, my God, I'm learning a lot. But let's talk about access, right? Accessibility. The Academy of Biblical Studies sort of has a way of creating these, like, imaginary borders around the knowledge, accessible in the Bible, with all these, like, highly bordered language and jargon and, method. We talked about method too, right? Method. And we've talked about this a little bit in some of the writings that you've also done and the way you think about the Bible. And it sounds to me as though, like, you are slightly bothered by that, as I am.
Yes.
So let's talk about accessibility and going to seminary, getting educated, and so on and so forth, versus, like, I'm just interested. I don't need seminary. I don't need all of that. But unfortunately, a lot of the great books are written in academic jargon that you may not be able to understand. So what do you think? Like, let's just speak broadly into that world of accessibility.
Yeah. Not only are there these imaginary borders, right? There are these very real ones.
Oh, my God.
Right? Yeah. It costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
To be a part of academia on purpose.
Yes.
Okay? Academic books are incredibly expensive by academic publishers on purpose, right? There are economic reasons why information is held and contained, and that goes back throughout the history of the religions that use the Bible, right? And we could talk about, Galileo in in Italy, and we could talk about, medieval Europe, but not just there, right? Always. Yes. Even in the stories in the Bible themselves.
Yes.
There is siloing of information. Some people get certain revelations. That's right. And some people don't. They don't get them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and it is really hard as somebody who has been essentially reared and brought up in the academy for me to say, like, oh, I'm going to, like, talk, I've tried to use the least amount of jargon that I've could.
Oh, my God.
And it's jargon filled. Everything that I've said, I realize as I'm talking, I'm like, wow, like,
I'm still using the same language.
I just like can't escape it in some sense. And that's really difficult. And that fixing that, which I think is important, because I think that is a problem.
Yeah.
Fixing that is a grand communal endeavor.
Yeah.
It means rethinking education.
Yeah.
Right? Like the whole thing. And we see in some ways how certain types of scholars are trying to do that. Yeah. Outside of biblical studies, I think one of the most incredible scholars who did anything, right, was bell hooks, who was writing on pedagogy were just like so accessible, right? So jargon free. And it's hard. It's really, really hard to write like bell hooks.
Yeah.
And there are other ways in which the sort of material things are being brought down, where certain scholars are trying to publish more free and open stuff, right? Where it's not behind paywalls and things. But those also don't solve these invisible borders that you've talked about, right? The ways in which like language itself constricts us and puts us into different categories and different ways of being and thinking. Willie Jennings, another professor from our wonderful divinity school, has just written this incredible book called After Whiteness about theological education, right? And he talks about how the idealized white rational subject, right? I have an econ degree before coming to divinity school. I would call that homo economicus, right? To use the jargon term, the perfect ideal man, right? Yeah. And it's a white guy, right? Like conceptually,
oh my God.
Like in the field, even though we don't say it. Yes. The perfect idealized scholar is still this white dude who has possession, control, and mastery. Those are the three characteristics that Jennings says defines whiteness in the academy. And how we get past that, and like how we like exercise that demon, which is like the language of Jennings, is a question. Yeah. And one that I hope that like we're working on. And also, the only way I think that happens is through the radical reshaping of, to use the Marxist phrase, the material conditions, right? Like if you can't come here, then you are, being... for financial reasons, like there's an exclusion that is happening.
Yeah, I think that's
and until like everyone can have access, you don't see things change. But what we've seen over the last 20 and 30 years, as things like post-colonial studies have come into the field, queer studies have come into the field, disability studies have come into the field, right? When more types of people come and engage in scholarship, right? They see different things.
They do.
And so I think in part getting rid of the invisible boundaries is deeply connected to getting rid of the like actual real physical ones.
Bringing in more people, diversifying. This is a whole conversation about multiracializing biblical studies and all of that, decentering whiteness, and taking all these like intentional steps to actually break down these barriers.
The SBL, which the Society of Biblical Literature, which is the big academic journal in our academic field, just put out a call for papers for asking women why more women don't do traditional criticism. And the implication in the way the call was is that that they're uninterested in doing historical criticism.
Right.
Now, for people who are more familiar with the field and familiar with many of these people, it's in fact what happens is these people are doing historical criticism, but they are bringing to the forefront questions of gender and race and sexuality and ethnicity.
Yeah.
And suddenly, because like those are topics that are relevant today and not just 2,500 years ago.
It is not.
It's not historical. It's not traditional. And it's like, no, that's not true at all. You guys just like are so resistant to anybody telling you that you could do anything else. And that's all framed by language. Mm-hmm. And that's all framed by power structures and things in power. And so like, very long, rambly answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, it's a long conversation to be had, but you did good by talking about I like that phrase, a communal grand effort, I think, in terms of moving towards solving this problem of access. Because that's what we need. Like, we I don't know if we're going to get a Superman in the field who's just going to, like, all of a sudden, revolutionize everything and then problem solved. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take hundreds and thousands of people, students, non-students, whatever, people doing all kinds of things over a long period of time for us to be able to get there. And so I like that. It's it's a good vision for us, and I'm glad that you casted that so well.
I also, because you say non-students, I want to say that the work that you, listener, might be doing when you read the Bible by yourself or in a study group or at church, all of that is equally legitimate and meaningful and important to the conversation about the meaning of the Bible. Yeah. You, in fact, don't need a seminary degree or a PhD or whatever to open up the Bible and be like, I just read this psalm and it stirred something in me. Yeah. It moved me. Yeah. It made me think about the world differently. Yeah. Or it made me think about this other passage of the Bible differently. Yeah. Like all of that, that's legitimate, meaningful engagement with the text. That's right. And that's just as an important part of the grand communal project as anything that some sort of hoity-toity academic who needs to go and present at some academic conference is doing, right? Both of those things are equally important. And it's about doing them well.
It is about
doing
them well,
because the academic hesitancy toward non-academics doing stuff with the Bible is, well, you don't know anything because you haven't been trained in X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And that's nonsense. That is. Because I have read plenty of academic papers written by people who are incredibly educated, and I'm just like, this is nonsense. This is complete and utter nonsense, and it shouldn't have been published. Yeah. And so I want to be very, very clear that academic credentialing does not, under any circumstances, mean authority or quality when it comes to the research, even though we say it should in our culture and the way we've designed academia. And some of the greatest look at the Apostle Paul.
Look at the Apostle Paul.
Right? The Apostle Paul does some of the most incredible exegesis of the biblical text. And sure, Paul is an educated person, right? But Paul is still doing stuff without the internet. Yeah. Or knowledge of every sort of Mesopotamian whatever, right? I don't think the Apostle Paul knew cuneiform. Yeah. and that's okay. Yeah. He still did some really good exegesis that was really important and meaningful to lots of people. Yeah. And you should too, even if you don't go to seminary. Yeah. If you care about the Bible and want to do stuff with it, you should. Yeah. Just don't be harmful to others.
That's right.
Right? Don't use it as a way to hurt people.
Yeah.
As long as it is not that.
Yeah.
Cosign.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's very empowering, because sometimes people, tend to put all these expectations on themselves. Like, I love this thing, I want to study about it, I don't have money to go to school, I don't have a degree, what authority do I have to make a claim? Like, we're always looking for these external validation through like institutions and degrees and things like that to affirm what we think and have read or believe about the Bible or anything in the world. And what you're saying is, you don't necessarily need that. Right? You don't need it. As long as you can do some decent, good, humble thinking and contribute something to the world that is not going to harm people, you are contributing to the entire progress of the world in a way that is effective, and you should be proud of that.
Yes.
Don't kill people with the Bible.
Please don't kill people with the Bible. But if you are doing good things and you are working in community with people, right? You're not just doing eisegesis, and you're not trying to go out and hurt people.
Yeah.
Like, it's all good and it's all valid.
Yeah.
It's like, that's important work, and you should be doing it if you feel called to do it.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So let's end with maybe just general advice, but if you can include some resources, some sources, some like people that have helped formed the way you think about the world and the Bible, and where people can go and find help if they need, like in intellectual interlocutors, people they can think along with, websites, even Twitter handles, whatever sources that people can go and find help.
Yeah. So many of the folks that I will probably name as being influential and meaningful to me, right, are going to be constrained by a couple of things. One, they're going to be in English, because English is my primary working language. Right. I do now know some ancient Hebrew, but most of the scholarship that I engage with is English. And so I know for a fact that there is incredible stuff going on in all sorts of different languages, right? There's incredible stuff going on in Chinese. China has the largest, fastest growing Christian community in the world. And so there's some incredible stuff going on there. There's some incredible stuff going on in Spanish and coming out of Latin America. There's incredible stuff coming out of in French, especially out of the African continent. So, saying all of that, one of the things that I would advise is that making really, really good use of search engines is really important. And knowing how to do that is kind of hard, because if you just go and you type in like Bible and right? Yeah. You're going to get like all of this stuff, because everybody wants to talk about the Bible. It can be helpful to use websites that are maybe tailored towards scholarship if what you're interested in is scholarship, right? Understanding that is not everyone's interest. But going and typing something into Google Scholar as opposed to regular Google is going to get you really, really different types of results.
That's right.
Professor Joel Baden here at Yale Divinity School has been really incredible, an incredible influence on the way that I think about the biblical text. Right, I really hope you get to bring him on your podcast if you have not already.
He will. My advisor definitely has to be here at some point.
Yes. So he also happens to have a lot of videos on YouTube where he has talked to people sort of everywhere from like really highly technical stuff to stuff that is like more intended towards a lay person.
Yes.
And so I think that there's a lot of diversity in his videos, and his videos, because of the way YouTube algorithms work, will also help lead you to sort of other folks who I think are really great. Francesca Stavrakopoulou just released a book last year called God and Anatomy, which I think is just one of the most interesting, fun books. Yeah. And I think especially for folks who come from a non-European, non-North American context, right? Where I would say that embodiment and magic and the fantastical aspects of world building are like just still more rooted and important. Speaking very much from a Latino background, where in my culture that is the case.
It is, yeah.
Her book, which is written for general audiences, really tries to establish how the God of the Hebrew Bible is like a real, like, God, and not just like like an ethereal thing, but something with flesh and blood and personality, in a way that gods of indigenous peoples and African peoples like historically have been, right?
Really relatable, yeah.
And so like I find that book really, really powerful because it gives a different perspective on what you might be reading in the Hebrew Bible, because your faith tradition might have told you that like, oh, well, when it describes God as this, like really that's just like a metaphor or something. And what she does in her book, God and Anatomy, is like really drill in on like, no, like they believed that, you know, the God of the Hebrew Bible, whose proper name is Yahweh, like had red skin, had giant hands, had, you know, like a body that filled a whole temple, right? Like a real like flesh and blood God in a way that as a Latino, like that just had a lot of impact on me. And I think that that's just a really, really great book. And would highly recommend it.
Awesome.
Listening to more of this podcast. This one right here. But don't tell Paul I said that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Antonio, for coming up.
I hope it was good. I really enjoyed it.
This is fascinating. This is great. Thank you for sharing it. Like, you know, so tellingly your personal story, the way you think about the world, the perspectives you have to offer, the questions you ask. It's all beautiful. Like, I have learned a lot, and I know people have also learned a lot, and they will learn a lot if they listen to this podcast closely. So thank you very much for coming. I'm sure we should do a part 2 on something else. There's more, right?
I would love to. Please.
Awesome. Thank you very much for coming by, and thank you folks for listening. We will see you in another podcast. Bye-bye.